Welcome to Don't Be Caged by Your Age, Judith. I'm so happy you're here. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Ande. It's wonderful to be here.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. Before we get started, please share with our listeners your age and where you're hailing from.
Yes, I'm delighted. I am a very happy 72 and especially happy in Philadelphia, which is a beautiful day today.
Oh, and a beautiful city, and everything's blooming. The dogwoods has to be looking gorgeous. I want to know a little something from your lived experiences. Okay. You've got decades under that tiara of yours. Is there like a few fun, surprising, or wild story you'd like to share with us so that we can get a flavor of who you are and where you've been?
Well, I actually do have a couple of stories, and they kind of all blend together. I was trained actually as a classical musician, and I also loved languages and writing. And it all came together when I landed in Paris after college. I was fluent in French, and I was tapped by a French magazine to interview the famous classical musicians who came to Paris but didn't speak French. And that led to connections and friendships with people I would never have met in this country. And so that included Leonard Bernstein, who gave me his personal tour of the White House, and a friendship with a young Italian conductor named Riccardo Muti, who had just been appointed music director here at the Philadelphia Orchestra. And long story short, years later, I ended up as strategic communications director for that orchestra. I did 2 stints, and that led to touring around the world, and then later a speechwriter for a university president and consulting in communications for banking and healthcare and lots of other things. So it's been a journey.
This is the beauty of having hindsight, right?
Absolutely.
You can look back and go, oh my gosh, that happened, which led to this, which led, you see the whole tapestry coming together. But when you're in the middle of it, oh, you've got a deadline. I've got to go meet this person. I've got to go interview them, right?
Absolutely true. And also just seeing how you were in the right place at the right time. And if timing had been just that different, none of it would have happened.
That's right. Oh my gosh, what a beautiful story, and a tour of the White House by Leonard Bernstein. That's a whole nother podcast conversation, listeners.
He was an amazing character.
And listeners, I don't know if you ever watched on Netflix Emily in Paris. I think Judith had her own Judith in Paris moment.
I did. Nothing like Emily.
With a little combination of Midnight in Paris thrown in there too, because of the luminaries, right?
Definitely. More that way. Yeah.
Oh, that's so great. And you had a powerful transition and transformation that helped establish what you're doing today. Please share with the listeners that story, because sometimes it's really hard to pivot. We can be really into what we're doing and we may say, no, I don't want to go off in another direction. But sometimes we have to, or if we don't make that choice, life forces us to.
That's exactly right. That is what happened to me, in fact. And I think, there are things that happen to all of us around 60. My experience, both myself and friends and clients, things are changing, but we don't want to think about it. We want to ignore it. So that's what I did. I started to feel somewhat burned out and tired. And I didn't think twice about pushing through, because that's who I was. And from that drive and that internal discipline and commitment to excellence and all the things that make us, at least the people that I generally work with, high performers. And, all of us who are professional in some way want to be our best. And then it just got to be more and more challenging. And one day I found myself on an ER table having them restart my heart. And to be honest, wasn't enough. It took 2 more times to say, something has to give here. You cannot be working 24/7. And I was paralyzed with fear, because what could I do at that age? Who would I be at that age, if not this person with a national reputation for what I did? It was inconceivable. And honestly, the fear I think is so underappreciated. People
Right.
think, oh, you can just, do this. No. And the more I think successful you've been in your role, particularly if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner or a level executive or a lawyer, those are a lot of the people I work with, you have become what you do. And the idea that you would be leaving that and all the people that respect you, and quite honestly there's usually status involved and all of that, you don't even want to talk about.
Right. Right. We learned that from Don Finn in episode 6, where he had been an attorney, and I mean a significant attorney, making changes, labor law changes, sexual harassment in the workplace changes for decades in Southern California, Judith. But it took him having a real life upset where he lost his bar license, his ability to practice law, that got him to shift gears and get into something which turned out to be lovely. So, listeners, be sure to go listen to Don's episode.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing too from so many folks is that we over identify with our role within an organization or as a founder and a business owner. And that becomes where our worthiness hangs out, right?
Totally.
And
Yes.
how we identify with our value in the world instead of understanding. And I remember a woman telling me this back in 98, Judith, and I was like, what? She said, Ande, you're going to come up against a point in your life where you are not going to have anything to do day after day after day. And you're going to have to feel really great about who you are
Yes.
without identifying what you're doing with what you
But
were
how
doing.
do you do that? See, that's the challenge. Is people they don't know where to start. They think they should be able to do it. We're doers, so we have to figure this out. But it's a wall. It's a tunnel with no end. In my case, I was in a way very fortunate. I happened to be lucky enough to have a friend who was a coach who said to me, if you could do anything in the world, what would it be?
Okay, let's just sit with those words. Listeners, are
Mhm.
you getting worried about what you're going to do when you're no longer identifying with your role in work? Let us know. Hop into the comments, whether on Instagram, LinkedIn, on the website. We really want to know if this is something that you're going through. And then, Judith, say that one more time.
If you could do anything in the world, what would it be?
That's a big question, especially someone as talented as you. Like, where would you even begin?
Well, again, I think I was lucky because when I had been working at a university, I had started a master's and I had studied coaching and I had loved it. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought this would be fun at another point in my life. It somehow bubbled up. And it was not very difficult from that point on to see my way toward thinking that this was an area that needed people, that people needed help because I, as a former journalist, did a lot of research. I collect information. People were starting to talk to me about what I was doing. And I began to see that this had a tremendous moment. And it was before the pandemic by several years. But then it absolutely mushroomed during the pandemic when people began to really think about priorities and what is changing in the world and what matters.
They got off the hamster wheel for a minute,
Yes,
right?
yes. And or were forced to consider getting off the hamster wheel, even if they didn't. They had to work in a different way. So all of this came together, and I realized that that was what I would do. And I was able to update my coaching training, and it's been incredibly rewarding.
First of all, thank goodness you're still with us. I'm sorry it took you 3 times. It's with the heart. That's where it really shows up for women listeners. When women are overdoing it, I'd say 9 out of 10 times, your heart is going to
Yeah,
suffer.
and this was not a heart attack, let me be clear. It was an
Yeah.
arrhythmia, but it was definitely something that needed to be addressed, and they made it clear that it had to do with stress. So,
And so when you finally had your big aha moment and said, okay, and friend said, if you could do anything, what would that do? And
Mhm.
I can see that curious mind of yours, the journalist background, the musician going, oh, I'm going to pull on that thread. What would I do? And you knew, you felt
I
and
did.
you had a memory inside you. And then you were able to take action. This, I think, is just what is so important is whether you individually are just so self-driven, you were able to take action, or you hired a coach who helped you. You have to do something, listeners, to uncover and discover for
I
this.
love the word uncover because I do think that, again, I was fortunate that I had the opportunity and had explored this other area. But so many of the people I work with have really been zeroed in on work, and they may not even have hobbies. They may not, or their work was their hobby. So everything is really rolled up into this one part of your life. That's why it's so important to begin thinking about this before that moment. And the moment can be, as you noted, it can be internal, where you're burned out, or it can be externally
Right.
imposed on you.
Right.
Yeah.
We know the ageism is so strong out there that yeah,
Yes,
you can be in the C-suite and people are still going to think about moving you on and out.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And when you say people need to be thinking about this ahead of time, these are the pre-retirees in their 50s.
Well, first of all, I hate the word retirement. So that's off the table as far as I'm concerned. I think that word is outdated. And I've seen others starting to say the same thing because that signifies pulling back, winding down, all of that. We are at a point where those of us in our stage and who've been fortunate to have access to education and good health care and all of that, we have about 20 to 30 more productive, healthy years in front of us.
Yes.
Despite what we might have heard during COVID, the reality is that most people that were really, really vulnerable were over 80. So there is really an opportunity here to think differently about this stage. And that's a very big piece of how it works, is recognizing that. And so if you're not in that mindset and you're looking at the end, you are going to make it much harder for yourself to go through that transition. Whereas if 6 months or a year before you know something has to happen, you begin to say, what's next for me? What can I move to instead of what am I letting go of? Then you're in a totally different position when the moment happens.
That's the ultimate reframe right there. And
Yes.
speaking of reframing, what word should we use for the time period where we may want to scale back a little or repurpose our lived experiences into a different avenue and lane?
Well, there is a book that I really recommend that people read called Stage Not Age. And it's by Susan Golden, who is a Stanford longevity researcher. It came out last year or the year before. And it is fascinating because she talks, first of all, about language and how the words like senior and retire, these really diminish us. And she talks about repurposing as a word that is a very viable word, as well as rewiring, which comes from that book you have right behind you, Jerry's wonderful book. But she describes life in 4 quarters now. And there's the starting, which is up till about age 30, the growing, which is about till age 55. And from 55 to 75, she calls that the Renaissance years. And I love that term. This is your Renaissance. And after that, by the way, from about 55 to 80 is this Renaissance. And then 80 to 100 is what she calls the legacy years. And then she adds an extra one because people are going to be living and are already living beyond 100. And she calls that extra, which I love. So, bottom line is, we're going to be continually learning new things, developing new ideas, and thinking about life in different ways. But you do need to make a change. If you're going to keep working, you need to work smarter. And I think the working smarter is where the needs of our generation can align with the needs of the younger generations who may feel threatened now. Because there are ways that we can work together and support each other. For example, just the whole idea of caregiving is becoming a lifelong need.
Yeah.
And people will be thinking more about moving in and out of full time work at all stages. So this becomes less of a zero sum game and more of how can we support change? And corporations are going to need to look at that because everyone has these needs.
They absolutely do. So I am in love with Stage Not Age. I'm going to be picking that book up. Listeners,
Fabulous.
highly recommend you do the same, as well as Don't Retire, Rewire. But
Fabulous.
this whole reskilling, I want to sort of dive into that for a
Yeah.
minute, because a lot of people, this is where Don't Be Caged by Your Age comes in, tell themselves they can't do something.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, technology. Well, we
Right.
know from Sandra Allison in episode 8, she's gaming and shooting zombies and has been before we even had PCs. She used mainframes. Okay. Technology is where I see a big fear and a lot of age discrimination going on,
Yeah.
assuming people over the age of 55, 60 don't know technology. And that is a whole couple of generations that don't understand. We've been coding and building tech companies since the 70s. But I think there's a fear around technology, like it's some secret language or something. It's helping people understand that reskilling component, but also people often don't want to be a beginner. They don't want to, like, oh,
Yeah.
I wish I'd learned that when I was younger. Why? Like, where did that story come from that you needed to learn it when you were a kid? I wish I learned to ski when I was a kid, or play tennis, or do all those things, or speak a language, or play an instrument, or, and that's why on the Instagram channel, folks, Don't Be Caged by Your Age Instagram's feed, I'm always showcasing people who really didn't start lifting that weight until they were 55 and were diagnosed maybe with osteoporosis or osteopenia, or some other situation happened. And the next minute they're a bodybuilder and they're 65. There's just
There's a
so many.
wonderful website that focuses on that. I'm sure you know it, Growing Bolder. Have you seen that website?
Interesting that you mentioned that. I shared one of their longtime memes that I've had for forever, which is age being the years that people have had to enjoy you.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
love Growing Bolder.
Yeah.
Yes,
And they do
absolutely.
showcase people that are starting new things at a different age. But the other piece about it is that it's important to take a deep dive into who you are and what really matters to you now. Because, and this is one of the things I love about Jerry's book, is that it takes you through a way to reflect on what you've accomplished, what are the skills and strengths that helped you do it, and what are your dreams? What are your interests? And the idea is that you might come up with something that you never thought of just by going through that exercise. And the key is having the structure and the ability to do it, which is where coaching comes in for a lot of people because you're working full time and you've got a lot of other things. It's not easy to kind of take that time for yourself. But the process really involves starting with yourself because most of us have, if ever, not done that kind of self reflection in many years.
And not from a lens of, if there's anything in the world you could do, what would that be? It would be
Exactly.
more around, this is my job title, or my performance is coming up. I need to
Yeah.
get better at something. That's
It makes me
fascinating.
think of one of the clients I had was a business owner. He had started two companies out in the Midwest, and they were outdoor companies. He is an amazing outdoorsman and loves fishing and taking people out on these amazing trips and manufactures products for that market. And his son had taken over the company, and he was an emeritus, and he simply could not let go. And I actually ended up working with him and his son because they needed to kind of figure out some boundaries. But more importantly, the client said to me, this is what I love. I have everything I love in my work. So what more could I possibly do? And through this process, he realized that he got like a epiphany, which is sort of what happened to me. He said, I want to help the guides that take us through these places and have no safety net. I want to start a foundation to raise money to help all of these amazingly knowledgeable people and support them and their families because they live in countries where that none of that is available. So, but it would never have happened
No.
if he hadn't taken the time to really explore.
I mean, as an entrepreneur, of course, there was something in there.
Yeah.
Listeners, I'm going to read a testimonial from one of Judith's clients, a former CEO, so you can get a flavor of how she really helps. And this woman said, I came to Judith for coaching around planning my work transition toward retirement. Oh, there's that word. She helped me clarify much more than that. Working with her, I came to see new possibilities that would make the next part of my life more fulfilling and rewarding, and the steps I could take now to prepare. Oh my gosh, Judith, you're like the gift that keeps on giving forever.
By the way, that was a male CEO. I work with both men and women, and a lot of my men say it's easier to talk to a woman. I don't know why. That particular person was one of those folks who had everything he loved in his work. And so
Mm.
it really was hard for him to take the time and to think. And I know, for example, he had some medical issues that had been plaguing him, but he hadn't bothered with. And, we set goals and he got that done so that when he was ready to do his next chapter, he had the physical capacity and strength to go ahead and do it.
And that's so important. You hear so many people who stop their work after 30, 40 years and they're dead within a year. I mean, you
Yes.
don't want that happening.
No.
And you
No, and in
certainly,
fact, that's a really good point because, of course, that's what retirement used to be, right?
right,
When Social Security was created, and you started getting it at 65, people didn't live past 70. So
right.
that is still living, that's still the same age, but we have this whole other opportunity. When I said work smarter, that's what I'm referring to. We have to do physical and mental self care. And
Right.
that means recognizing that our bodies are changing and we have to keep giving them the attention they need if we want to stay productive.
Well, and you're talking about high performers who are used to pushing the envelope on every level
That's
and
right.
and relying on their body to just keep on doing it. It's
Or
like
ignore
the
their body. I mean, I have lawyers who say, I want to work till I drop, and I'm in the office 7 days a week, or at least 6.5. It's all the time. Do they work out? Maybe now and then, but that's not on their
they're
list.
getting takeout or they're eating at the
Yeah,
restaurants.
it's just like that's not a priority. You cannot ignore that anymore. You
Well,
cannot.
yeah, and that leads me to the next part of this conversation I want to have, which is as a high performer, you're used to your backup system, right? Really being there for you. One of
Yes.
the hardest things I've experienced in embracing this age and stage, I'm 67, and I've been very spoiled with my body, folks. It's DNA. I have taken care of it over the years, but you start looking down and it is just not the body you had 10 years ago, 20, and certainly not 30s, but I'm just talking the body you had in your 50s.
Sure.
Peop- People
Sure.
saying, oh, I'm old in my 50s. I go, no, 50s were good. But as you're going into the 60s and 70s and 80s during our Renaissance years, we have to somehow shift our expectations for our body, for whether it's hearing, eyesight, aches and pains and joints, and things that we would normally just hop up out of bed.
But there's
How?
another side to that, Andy.
Okay,
And
yeah,
what I
sure.
see more importantly is people saying, and I have a recent example of this myself. Oh, that's just how it is. I'm getting older. So I was one of those people, am one of those people that has periodic pain in my hands. I
Hmm.
figured, okay, I'm using them all the time. I didn't really think about it. And then it came time to take care of my perfect little grandson and go up there for a couple of weeks and have to do things like get him out of a car seat. And I realized that my pain was enormous and I was going to be unable to do it. And I could have said, but instead I thought, let me check this out. And I went to a sports medicine doc, got the x-rays. Yes, there was severe, not moderate, severe arthritis in my
Well,
thumb,
what instrument did you play?
violin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, there we go.
there was definitely that. But I did hand therapy for 6 weeks. And now I have strength in my hands again.
Oh
So
my gosh, listeners.
I could have said, oh, it's, that's just my age. But it's really important to not say, this is just the way it is. Get it checked out. It may be that there's not a lot that can be done, but you might find there is. And I now know every couple of days I have a few things to do to keep this up.
Right. Yeah.
But now I used to think, oh, it hurts a little when I open jars. It doesn't hurt anymore.
But Judith, you were, as we say here in Boston, wicked smart to go and reach
I
out to
was
this.
motivated. I want
You
that
went,
with that baby.
you went to the right place. If you had gone to your general practitioner or something like that, but you went to sports. Sports people are about repair,
That's
restore,
right.
let's get you back working again.
And
And
that's, one of the things I like to do with clients is people say to me, executive transition coaching, well, is that life coaching or is that executive? And it's like, it's the whole person at this stage. It's not work or life. We're all one person. And so having that kind of information, I love to be able to share with clients. Yes, that's what I did with this CEO. See a sports medicine person. He had had back issues 20 years ago and saw an orthopedist and didn't want surgery. I said, there's so much that's developed since then. Go get a new assessment, see this kind of person, and then figure it out. And he had the same experience I did.
absolutely. And I'm going to have someone who specializes on hearing aids because there's such a stigma against hearing aids. And you get into a busy cocktail party or any kind of restaurant, the music is playing, we've lost you. If you cannot hear or that jumbled noise doesn't work, you need hearing aids, which is going to bring back a whole new life, right?
So, Ande, that takes us to another one of the areas we were going to talk about, which is what do we want from corporations?
Yes.
Have you heard anything about the new hearing devices from Apple and Bose? They have figured out
Oh my
that this is a market waiting to be tapped. And this is what corporations are starting to recognize. Another one is Warby Parker, who started with hipsters and are now selling progressive lenses because we aren't interested in help. I'm falling and I can't get up. There's a whole, and they are starting to recognize that. So you're going to see things like hearing aids changing.
Well,
It's
and the
already
thing
happening.
I'm waiting for an entrepreneur to come up with is affordable dental care. I swear, once you turn 65, nobody cares about your teeth anymore unless you've got a big trust fund or a big fat wallet.
Well, what about vision? I mean, I
And
just went to the eye doctor today and Medicare doesn't even cover
no,
glasses.
no,
It's crazy.
that's
Now,
crazy. And that again, that's discrimination for a population. I'm going to have to do a shout out for Invisaware, my babies.
oh,
These are two
yes.
kids right out of school that I started mentoring in 2016 who have hit it out of the park with their gorgeous jewelry, keychains, hair scrunchies, bracelets that come with a device that you just tap twice. If you have fallen, if you are have been in an accident, if you are afraid you're going to get date raped, any of those things, lots of times your phone is nowhere nearby.
Yeah.
This is on your body. It's very attractive. It's not some big clunky thing that, again, stigma and discrimination for the seniors. And it's so beautiful. So everybody, I'll have the link
I'm
in the
going to
show
take a look
notes.
at that for sure. There's a story about OXO, the OXO tools that we use in the kitchen, the
No.
can
Oh,
openers, the OXO, they're everywhere.
yeah.
Well, that was started by a retiree whose wife had arthritis. So these were products that were created for people that needed help with their hands. And they became so popular because they were better designed. So it
So
works both
good.
ways.
I love that. And another thing I hear stories around, myself included, this don't be caged by your age is really about dissolving our internalized
Very
ageist
much.
beliefs,
Very
is
much.
helping folks look forward about the possibilities instead of behind. Because looking
Yeah.
backwards, you're feeling wistful and I wish I were younger or I wish I was back then. How do you help your clients process this? And how do you help them develop new stories that they can feel good about looking forward?
Well, it is a journey. And I start by saying to people, because of who you are, you're a driven person. You want this tomorrow, but you need to go through something. It's not going to happen overnight. It usually takes about 6 months. And I describe what I do anyway as like buying a house. So there's 3 phases. And the first phase is figuring out what your checklist is. What are you looking for? And that's where this deep dive comes in, where we start to really do a reflection and kind of figure out what those dreams are, what those accomplishments were, what those strengths are. And there's a whole bunch of other things, including the drivers that Jerry talks about, because I use her book, and understanding what drives you to work as opposed to somebody else.
Right. And
Um,
the beauty of Jerry's book, everyone, Don't Retire, Rewire, is that you want help in finding what fuels your passion
right.
because we are human. We need to get up in the morning and be on purpose, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And then is it in alignment with who you are, like your personality? And then finally, look, you're going to live another 20, 30 years. You best be making some money, right?
Yeah, but sometimes it's not about money.
Right.
Honestly, a lot of my people, it's about learning to find something that gives you a sense of purpose. And it could be volunteer,
Yeah.
it could be giving back,
Yeah.
but it's meaningful work. And so after that first stage is completed, then we start with the scenarios and brainstorming possibilities. And just like when you're buying a house, the first one or two might fall through, they don't pass inspection, right? So you're doing research. You're really looking at what the pros and cons are of specific possibilities. And then when you've landed on the one that really lights you up, which is what we're looking for, the third stage is getting you ready to launch. And so for one person, it might be helping them downsize. For another person, it might be helping them get a new LinkedIn profile, writing an exit letter. I just did that with a client last week who's leaving and needed help kind of going through all that. And that's where all my previous experience in leadership comes in, language and all of that. But whatever it is, it's different for each person. And the goal is that when they're done, they have an action plan and they have what I call the business card in their head for who they are next. So if somebody says at that party, the so called retirement party, well, what are you going to do now? You've got that. You know, I'm going to be an XYZ. And it's usually, I'm sure Carrie Hannon talked about this, it's the slash portfolio, right? It's the I'm a CEO slash kayaker slash writer slash we are lots of things. And that's very often where we end up.
Oh my gosh. That is outstanding. The buying a house example is so easy to grasp and understand
Yeah,
because if anybody recalls when they first went to buy a house or just had to buy any other house, you go through the process of after one,
that's
after
right.
after another until you find the right one. Because one of my questions was pulling on threads. If you've been in an environment where you were rewarded for success, you got to get comfortable with house after house until you find the right one.
Understanding that your priorities or your criteria may not be what they were for what you might have called success.
Right.
And I love the term diversifying your energy portfolio because just like we do that with our investments, we have to think about productivity differently at this stage. And that means, yes, there's work, whatever it is, but then there's that physical and mental self care. And then there's some other things that are very important for well-being, and those are relationships,
Right.
and community and learning,
Connection.
and
Yeah.
continuing to learn and grow. So whatever combination of those things you need, you need all of them, and they need to have time for all of them.
Well, and what I love about your work, Judith, is that you help people get there
Yeah,
because you've been in the it's inconceivable.
yeah,
Princess Bride, everybody, right? Inconceivable. And you help them all of a sudden go, oh, oh, and you uncover layers and give them an opportunity to be curious and step back and pull on the threads and understand that that's a normal, healthy, diversifying their energy to explore different things and uncover different opportunities that might be a fit and be okay with the fact that maybe I do this just for a few years and then I do something else.
absolutely.
You don't have to get locked in. Listeners, you may recall episode 2 with Mildred, who wanted to write a book. She knew she had a book in her, but she wanted to really understand what is creative writing. And at the age of 68, she went back to school and got her master's in creative writing and became published at the age of 72. It's okay to go back to school. There's so many more comfortable
Absolutely.
ways to go back to school and learn new skills right now. You don't have to sit in a classroom anymore, right, Judith?
Yeah, and I wouldn't even call it go back to school because that is a kind of limited description, but upskilling, getting the
Right.
training, there are so many different ways to do that. I actually had a client like that who wanted to do what you're talking about, and I knew a person who was a young adult writer. I just hooked them up,
There you
and this
go.
person began to sort of tutor the other one. And people want to help.
They
And
do.
part of it is getting that support and that sense of mentorship.
Oh my gosh, so much great information here. So, what final piece of advice would you like to have our listeners take on, think about, sit with to help them thrive after 65?
Well, I think there are two. One is keeping moving. I have attended so many webinars and programs about health and well being after this stage in life, including for the brain. Nothing supports well being like movement, whether you call it exercise or anything like that, even if it's a little every day. I have so many people that are afraid because they feel like they can't get there, whatever the there
Yep.
is. And I say, start with a tiny bite. What's one little thing you can do today for one day? Maybe it's get up and walk around your room twice. Just commit to whatever you can do today. And then tomorrow, see what feels doable tomorrow. But don't try to do it all in one fell swoop. We're doomed to fail that way.
Yeah. And so I'm encouraging you listeners, there's wonderful videos on YouTube, people moving their bodies from a seat, and they've got great music, and you can even get your steps in while you're seated. Be sure to go check out Judith's website. Judith, tell people how they can find you and connect with you.
Well, the website is www.judithkurnickcoaching.com, and I have a exercise actually on there that people can download for free that helps you kind of do an assessment of where you are in terms of your own satisfaction with life. I have an electronic calendar on there where you can reach out to me or you can just email me at judithkurnickcoaching.com. I'm happy to do a complimentary consult with people. So
Oh, that's so wonderful. As I said earlier, you are the gift that keeps on giving. And I know that you work specifically with those high achievers,
I do.
which frankly, need the most help to get detached from what they've been high achieving. And that's a real struggle for so many people. I'm grateful for your time, your presence today, Judith. You shared so much wisdom in such a short period of time. I took notes. Listeners, I hope you took notes. Please share what your thoughts. If you have any questions for Judith or for me, you know where to find us. The website. The website, you can even hit the mic button, okay, and say hi that way. Or on Instagram or LinkedIn. Don't be caged by your age. We are here to help you help each other. What am I talking about? We all need help. It
Yeah, we
takes a
do.
village, right, to age and be in our renaissance period. Judith, I just have one last question because I use retirement all the time. What is another word we could use for this popular word?
Well, I do think it's the next stage, and I
Next
think
stage.
I that's what I use. It's not as concise. I know a lot of people like to use rewirement. It has the right ring. And, kudos to Jerry for coming up with that. But I don't think we have the language yet. We are pioneers. That's the truth. This is a movement that is happening as we speak.
It really is. We know from the World Health Organization that this is a problem for societies, getting people to just to stop in their tracks at a certain age. It is a movement. We're figuring it out as we glow.
And by the way, there just as a note, you reminded me that I saw an interview with Ken Dichtwald of Age Wave, who really predicted this movement years ago. And he mentioned that he had an idea that was being considered by President Clinton for a senior corps. And the idea of taking the power of our generation and
Yes.
putting it to use in significant ways. There are things like that happening, and even the AARP website has opportunities where people can start to do things, and it doesn't have to be a lot of time. But getting off your whatever and helping, making a
Right.
difference in people's lives is so good for your own mental
Oh,
health.
even for introverts, sensitive introverts, there's a
Yes.
way that you can do it that's healthy and protects your own boundaries. But what's beautiful about that seniors idea is it hits all the buttons for connection and visibility and collaboration
Yes.
that folks really crave, and they're not going to be able to get it from their neighborhood anymore or even their town. There needs to be a purpose behind what they are going to do that day, and to know they're contributing their lived experiences. You have so much skills to share, and there's so much more that you can give no matter what you've done in life. Judith, thank you, thank you, thank you for adding value. And I'll have all the links to Judith where you can connect with her and learn more from her and hire her if that sounds right for you. Listeners, we're not done with you. You have so much more to give. Don't let those internalized ageist beliefs prevent you from pursuing new dreams and opportunities, no matter what age or stage you're at. Until next time, I'm wishing you a delicious day everywhere you glow. Cheers from Boston, and thank you, Judith.
Andy, thank you for being such a skilled and welcoming host.
Thank you for that, Judith. We love when that happens, right, listeners? Woohoo! Cheers.